On the backs of Ducharme and Lopez Senegal, the UConn Huskies win again. This time against a pesky Marquette team, 61-48. UConn moves to 11-2. Marquette 9-5. This was a great game for the Huskies. This is exactly what they needed, as they are still not 100%. They are still struggling with some band-aids, if you will, but they looked really good in this one, especially with Ducharme, Lopez Senegal, and obviously Edwards did some good stuff as well. This team, I feel like every time we talk about them, there's someone new to talk about. And that's what I absolutely love covering this squad, because there's just so much firepower on this squad, Steve.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And the thing is, and I want to give all the UConn women fans a couple of seconds to get ready to start typing their comments, because they're going to say, "Oh, here comes Beck again. He's going to be really critical." Okay, but I want to start off positive, and then I'm going to go into a problem that doesn't seem to be going away. And even their coach, Gino Auriemma, recognizes this is a problem. And I think the quote was, "They're asking me how I'm going to fix it." He goes, "I don't know, because I've never had to fix this before." But as of right now, UConn is second in the nation in field goal percentage, third in the nation in three-point percentage, and they lead the nation in assists. The problem is they're averaging 17.4 turnovers a game, and it's not just when there's a player out injured, like Moule, for example. I mean, every game they're committing 17 turnovers. They had 17 turnovers against Marquette. Fortunately, for the Lady Huskies, Marquette does not have the firepower that UConn has, but they've got to stop the bleeding that way. I like their aggressive play. They know how good they are offensively, so I understand where maybe they want to force a pass to get a really nice. They're not looking for highlight reels, but to get a really nice play. And those kind of plays can really be heartbreaking for opponents when you've got that kind of talent going there. But you cannot commit that many turnovers and give up the amount of points they're giving up off of turnovers to elite teams come tournament time. So there's plenty of time to get it fixed. This isn't March, and this issue still is there, but I think that's sort of the one Achilles heel that continues to hobble them and not let them reach their offensive potential. Because really, I think the sky is the limit for this UConn team from an offensive standpoint. They've just got to, and it's a double-edged sword, Christian, because they can't really then become too cautious or too careful, because they're not going to maximize that talent level. So there's a fine line there. And then if any coach is going to be able to figure it out, it's going to be Auriemma. But it's a concern for me. I mean, how good, because we've seen some just amazing performances, even in losses, out of this Connecticut women's team. But how good could they really be at this point if they weren't turning the ball over at that rate?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And obviously we know they're not at full strength yet. They're still building back up. And if they could find a way to, obviously, health is going to help the building back to full strength, but if they can find a way to get rid of those turnovers, this team is going to be, I don't want to say unstoppable, but they're going to be very hard to beat. Yeah. And they have some tough games coming down the line. The Big East on the women's side is no joke this year. Okay. And they have some tough games even outside of conference that they got to play. Tennessee, who's starting to come back. They're starting to be on the up and up. They had a rough beginning of the season. And obviously we know that in February they have to play South Carolina, right? We know that's coming February 5th. I'm sure that's circled in red marker on their schedule, right? So that's something to keep in mind. When you look at this squad now, again, we know that they are struggling to be at full health, but it's weird to me that they still have a really short bench. And what I mean by short bench is they played 7, sure, but those 2 bench players played a total of 9 minutes. We had 3 from Patterson, 6 from DeBerry. And hey, if that works for you, you found a way to win the game, sure, go for it. But is that sustainable through all of Big East play? And that's something to keep in mind. You're talking about a Big East conference right now that has undefeated teams in it still, right? You're talking about a Big East conference that has teams like Seton Hall and Villanova, who are 11-12 team wins already so far in the season.
St. John's.
So, yeah, right. Yeah, undefeated. Right. So Creighton, who's ranked as well this year. I know that Creighton's had some ups and downs, but they're also still ranked. I just don't know if it's sustainable. Now, obviously, they might not have a choice to only go 7, but maybe throw more than a couple minutes that way and do that. Maybe it's fatigue that's doing something with the turnover ratio. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. I'm not sure. But when I watch these games, I know that there are 2 problems that exist. One, that they are, you can't say that they're completely fresh in the second half. No matter what you think their conditioning are, and we know that a lot of these players are not afraid to play 40 minutes. We see it all the time. And they're good at the end of the games. That's true. But you can't say that they're completely fresh because they're not getting the subs that they should get, because they don't have that depth that a Power 5 team like UConn should have, a big school like UConn should have. And then obviously the turnovers, like you mentioned, Steve, that is something that just has to get fixed. And I feel like that's not the first time we've talked about that. That needed to be fixed last game, and it's still there. So, I mean, even if you find a way to just slowly get rid of them, you had 17 this time. Hopefully, you could only have 13 or 14 next week and then next game, and then get down to 10 or 11. Make better decisions. Those turnovers can really impact you. They change the possessions of the game. And it's just not good. So right now that worked against this pesky Marquette team. 61-48 was the final. But when you go against teams like St. John's, when you go against teams like DePaul, those turnovers might not be enough to get back into it. So that's something to keep in mind.
Oh, absolutely. And then Marquette, there was a player that I couldn't take my eyes off, and it was their point guard, Rose Nakuma. She only had 2 points. So if you look at the line score, you're like, well, why are you even bringing this person up? She was responsible for a lot of those turnovers. Even if she wasn't credited with the steal, she was playing an aggressive form of defense and forcing a pass that ended up turning into a turnover and points for her team. I mean, she had terrific court vision and court presence. I didn't really know a whole lot about her. Other than when you read the preseason things about of all the teams, she certainly stood up. I mean, I thought she played a really, really good game, and I think I want to use her as an example. There's going to be teams that are playing in the Big East that are going to have that little pesky dynamo talent level to them, and that aggressiveness that potentially could force and exploit the UConn turnovers. And then you were talking before about the shorter bench. Yeah. And I had mentioned the double-edged sword between being too cautious and not maximizing an offensive potential. If you're bringing in players that aren't as experienced yet, that maybe, I think Auriemma loves all of his players, but I think it's fair to say he doesn't have as much confidence in all of them at this point. So if he is seeing his starters turning a lot of turnovers, is he then going to go down to that 8th or 9th player that might be available that could be prone, to turning the ball over until, once they find the fix and they stop the leak, okay, then you can work, these players into games, especially against a team like Marquette that's not really going to contend, for a conference title. You can work them in there. It was notable, like as you said, that there was a very short bench here, and the people that did come in off the bench didn't play many minutes. You would think against a Marquette, they would have more opportunities and play more minutes, but that's how out of control the turnover situation has been. In order to keep things going and trying to be firing on all cylinders, I think that Auriemma is having to rely too heavily on his starters until they can figure out in practice and even in games, how do we stop this issue of turning the ball over?
Very good point. Yeah, very good point. We'll see what happens with this UConn team on Tuesday night as they take on Butler. Butler is currently 6-8, and UConn sits at 11-2. I'm interested to see what the rankings are going to look like as well for the women's when they come out today, earlier we'll see what happens in that aspect. Let us know your thoughts in the comment description below. What do you think about this UConn team? What are you worried about with these turnovers? Do you think it's a concern that really needs to be looked under a magnifying glass like Steve and I are doing so? What do you think about that rotation? Do you think that there is not enough minutes from the bench, or are you just fine with that? Let us know in the comment description below. Hit like and subscribe while you're there. And thanks for watching /review.